Okay.
Okay? What's
Yeah.
okay?
Whatever you want to say is
All right.
okay.
Elda May, are you awake?
I'm awake.
You're awake. You got a good memory going. You're listening.
Thank the Lord.
That's right. And you're going to tell us some...
You know where I got that memory?
Yeah, from me.
No.
No.
Same old book.
Yeah, it's a good book.
Reading one day, and I'll come across the verse that said, "Let this mind be in you that was also in Christ Jesus."
Yeah.
And I said, now wait a minute. That's just what I want. I don't want to be forgetful like my grandmother
I
was.
see, but you're using a used mind. Is that what you're saying? You're using a used mind? That your mind be like the one that was in Christ. You're using a used mind. That's what
His
you want.
mind.
All right. And Johnny Mathews, are you in good fettle?
Huh?
Whatever that may mean. No, you're full of lies this morning and old stories and tales.
Well, like I said, I was a kid only 5 years old when I come to this island.
Yeah.
And we come from Rockport on May of 1910. And we moved all of our furniture and a cow and a calf and a horse and a buggy from Rockport on an old two-master sailing boat.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Remember this boat that they dug up out of the
channel?
Channel out there?
Yeah.
Well, the same kind of boat.
Oh, is that
Same
right?
kind of everything. Belonged to old Captain George Roberts.
Is that right?
Yeah, he lived in Rockport then.
Yeah, yeah.
And he moved us over here, moved all of our furniture and everything over here. And then the family moved over on the mail boat. Mail come out of Rockport those days.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah. Come out of Rockport those days. And landed down here at Klein's Point, what they call Klein's Landing.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
And when we got here, we had to wait. We got here about somewhere around just before noon.
Yeah, yeah.
And old Captain George Roberts and his boat things, they left about daylight that morning. We passed them out there in the Randers Bay.
Mm-hmm.
We got here and we had to wait till dark that night before he ever showed up. And had old John Allister.
Oh yeah, yeah, I remember.
Or he run a dray service then. A pair of mules and an old wagon.
Yeah, right.
Well, he began picking up our stuff, but we got our bedding so we could have something to sleep in. See, the home I had then was moved from right over there where the Spanish villages is. My daddy bought that big old 9-room, 2-story house and moved it over on his property where I'm at today.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
this was in 1910?
1910.
Okay.
And it left a big hole there where that old house sat. A lot of sand blowing and everything. Anyway, we moved it over. My daddy bought the property from the Roberts family, the Emma Roberts and Captain and Uncle Willie Roberts. The other Robert, Emma Roberts and W.M. Roberts the big.
I've heard of all those names. I'm familiar with the names. Of course, I didn't make it here early.
We finally got ourselves established here then. But Papa was here about nearly a year before we moved here.
Yeah.
He got all this stuff straightened out. And I come in to move here. They're building these jetties back in they started in 1907. And they were putting the jetties in and getting ready to build what's called a deep port right out here at the Harbor Island.
Yeah. Well, that was the same year that they started digging the Panama Canal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when we first took over to dig the canal.
And my daddy established his saloon business because those days they don't allow one saloon in a certain amount of population. Well, the oldest saloon they had here then was in the old Tarpon Inn.
Oh.
And they wouldn't cater to those working people, those that worked on the jetty. Those days, over half of the work was done by hand power.
Yeah.
Old rocks, anywhere from small rocks on up to 50, 100-pound
boulders.
Throw it in a bin, and then they railroad flat cars, put them in that bin, and the old steam thing was carry them out there and dump them. Well, anyway, they wouldn't cater to this. The Papa said, well, he seen a good opportunity to make some money.
Yeah.
So he
Set up that
couldn't get a
saloon.
permit to put a saloon
Mm-hmm.
in here because the population wasn't big enough.
Yeah.
So he took one of his old sailing boats that he had when he was commercial fishing back in those days. He built a little house on it, built him inside bar thing, and he bought it down here and anchored it up in Turtle Cove, right straight off east of where the Coast Guard station is now.
East of there.
Yeah, east. I mean not east, but north there.
North of there. Okay.
North there, yeah. And he started his business that way. In other words, as long as he was laying on the water, they couldn't do nothing about it.
Yeah.
See? And so that's where he got his start right there. And then the town, on paydays, these guys, all these working guys, there was nearly 2/3 of them was foreigners,
Mm-hmm.
from all nationalities.
Mm-hmm. A lot of Jamaicans.
Yeah, there was a lot of them Russians, and some of them Russian Finns, and some of them were Poles, and some of them were Germans, some of them were
Immigrants.
Norway Swedes, and some of them were Italians.
Yeah.
Just mixed up.
About how many were on the island when you came?
The island was, I'd say, around pretty close to around 800 people.
Were that many?
Yeah.
That was more than it was when I came there. We had about
Yeah, yeah.
500 population.
Yeah, we didn't have no people after that 1919 storm where everybody left. And
Yeah.
it's been years and years trying to build up.
Yeah.
We're one of the slowest communities ever around here to ever build up the size it is now.
Yeah.
And we probably got established like that. And where I'm living right now, there was only 2 more houses south of me. The
Mm.
one right there where Bill Moore's, about where Bill Moore's tackle store is,
Yeah.
little bitty old one-room shack belonged to a fellow named Schultz.
Yeah.
And then right there about where the water tower is now, there was another little 2-room house there. And nothing from there on, there was nothing. Outside of, I'll take it back, it was down here on this road going to the beach, down there by, right across from the Island Mooring people, that road going there.
Oh, yeah.
Where the little house up on the hill. Right out there, you'll see an old chimney still sitting out there.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, where outside where they from a fireplace. Well, that was a ranch house.
Well, I was wondering if that wasn't about the same location the old ranch house was back
That's
in
the ranch house.
34, 35, and 36.
Yeah, well that.
When we built our house next to you, the old Mexican that lived in that ranch house
Yeah.
used to ride his horse down past our house on his way downtown. He'd always stop out in front and wait for me to wave at him. Couldn't understand a word.
Yeah,
That was old
I'm trying to
Jesus.
think of his name. What is it?
Jesus, wasn't it?
Treevy or something like that. I forget his
Oh, I don't
name.
know his last name.
Pete something or other.
Pete? Hmm.
Yeah. He ride that old horse all day, back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that house burnt down. I don't remember what year, but it burnt down. Just left that old chimney sitting there.
Mhm.
When I was a kid, old Grant, there's 2 Grant brothers. There was twins.
John Grant and
One John Grant and Ed Grant.
Oh,
Well, Ed Grant done the running back in those days early till he passed away, and then old John Grant took it over.
Uh-huh.
And he'd hire us boys 50 cents a day in our meal to help herd these cattle up around the island.
Yeah.
And we go down there and I rode most of the time horseback.
Mhm.
No saddle or nothing, see. And we'd herd them up and down around Corpus Christi Pass. He had another ranch house with a pen there, and he'd sort the animals out where he was going to take them. And then we'd take them across the Laguna Madre, across Corpus Christi Pass, Laguna Madre, wade them over to the mainland.
Well, it wasn't any intercoastal canal there then.
No, there wasn't no intercoastal
You didn't even
canal.
have to swim
The
'em.
deepest water was right on the shore of where
Padre Island?
not up Padre Island, but the mainland side.
On the mainland side?
Yeah.
Oh, is that right?
That used to be a small water where all these old sailboats used to sail through there and going up in the lagoon
Oh, yeah.
fishing.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
And I never forget, I made that one trip across there, and we had some of the places where we hit, we had cattle would have to swim maybe for a little ways to
Yeah.
get back footing.
Yeah, that much
But we
water.
herd them up, and we waded water where we was just about that much of the horse sticking out of water.
Is that right?
I never get that.
Yeah.
And
Well, when you came, Ragtown wasn't here, was it?
Huh?
Ragtown wasn't here when you came.
no,
When did it start?
Huh?
In what year did they start living there at Ragtown?
what year they started building?
Started putting up tents and people living down there in the old Ragtown sector.
They was there when we come there in Elda Island.
Oh, it was there.
They was there when we come there. People lived out in those white sand hills right there,
Yeah.
back close to the where. There were people there when we come there.
Well, I wondered when that thing got started.
That's in
Well, the Ragtown that we know started after the 1919 storm. Didn't that storm wipe it away pretty much?
oh, the 19 storm washed it completely away, cleaned out, and then the people come back and get established again, and they call it Ragtown there those days.
That's when we
Yeah,
came in
that's where they got the name
1920.
right. But
Well, that's where my first home was.
yeah, all y'all.
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
That was
And-
1929 that we came.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 3 years before we
And,
first showed up.
That house that the Sims family had, where that house was back over there, way back over there in that area, and they moved it up there on that lot where,
Oh, old Pop Sims?
yeah, old Pop Sims' old house.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And
Across the street from where Billy Sims'
Rick
house
Paul
is
Street
now.
and Billy Sims, that's right.
Yeah.
They moved that there,
Uh-huh.
and there was some of the Mathewsons, and I don't know how many different families lived down in that area. And on top of that, there was a McDonald company had built a big machine shop down there, right down in
Yeah,
there.
is Ragtown?
Yeah,
Is that a fact?
had a big machine shop. They built it because that was when they digging out the port, digging the jetties and all that, and dredging up on Harbor Island, dredging Harbor
Yeah,
Island
mhm.
to make a island out of it. And McDonald, I don't know where he come from, but anyway, they were figuring there's going to be a lot of machine work done for
yeah.
ships and things like that, so he built that thing.
Mhm.
Meantime, old man N.B. Hamilton, he had a machine shop here too.
That's the one that used to have the boathouse down
Yeah,
far
old
end of
man
the
had a
road?
boat. But he had a
Okay.
machine shop right there where that Mustang cottage is, that old wooden two little storehouse,
Yeah.
all that. Well, he had a machine shop right there,
Mm.
and back there. And then he turned around and built that concrete building, two-story concrete building.
Mm.
And across the street, he built another building there, one-story out of concrete blocks. And
Well, that was down in Ragtown itself, or down toward where the flat was and those things?
that's where Station Street and Cotter Street
Okay.
joined together, right
Yeah.
on that corner there.
Yeah, gotcha. Mhm.
And the old Coast Guard station was right there on that same corner,
That's
just across
right.
the street.
That's right, I remember
And
that.
it was washed away in
I
1919.
don't remember it either.
But in 1925, they built that other building right there in that corner. Built it up high over,
Old man Teller's old house?
yeah,
old
back
man
by
Teller's?
Teller's house, yeah. That's
Okay.
right, yeah. Old Teller. And then in
That's
recent
where the
years,
old Coast Guard station was.
that's where the Coast Guard station was until they rebuilt this new one they got now and tore the old one down.
Yeah, you remember that about that time they built that HECP building down there. It's about 39 or 40, maybe 41.
Yeah.
Remember the big the harbor entrance control post? Before they built this Coast Guard station, in 1940, I guess it was, they built this great big harbor entrance control post, just beginning of the war. And the hardest labor I have ever done, I did on that thing. But it was a big, long building. You remember that, Johnny?
Oh, you mean during the war, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, they built the barracks inside of the Coast Guard property.
That's it. Yeah, great big, long
Big
brown
building. Yeah,
building.
a couple of those houses that my sister Mary come from there.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, Matt McCauley bought one of those sections.
Yeah.
And turned around and used the lumber and built those little cottages out there.
Yeah. I remember, well, you know, when they were building that thing, they threw a massive amount of scrap lumber across the street from, you know, scrap lumber. And all these island boys run out there and pick up a carload of scrap lumber. And I can remember about 3 good fights that took place over grabbing that scrap lumber.
Yeah, where Melvin Littleton's home is right now, where he lives.
Yeah, right.
He's sitting right on top of a slab, concrete slab, of a big home that belonged to old man Joe Curry. He built there out of this concrete blocks.
Blocks, yeah.
Well, the 1919 storm washed it away. He just left that, and the sand blew over it. When Melvin went to put his foundation there, he hit that concrete. He didn't know what he hit, but he was hitting the foundation of that old home.
You already had a good solid base.
See, that whole street one time was on both sides was loaded down with homes. And then joined that street, the Mercer Street, and the next street over, there was, well, where
Henry stood.
where Revell Nelson, but Marvin and Norby's daddy.
Yeah, A.D.
A.D.
Yeah.
That on that street right there, going up and down there was a whole row of houses all the way down through that area.
Well, when did they get wiped out?
Yeah, it got worked out in 1990 and washed everything away. You know?
Yeah.
You know, the town was built up over in that area most.
I see.
Yeah. And
But then when it got cleaned off during the storm,
when that hurricane come through, it brought so much water with it, it was melting those sand dunes down, and it stayed so long. It began to current, the water began to coming in on a Saturday evening on us, and it stayed that way until Monday morning.
All right.
Yeah.
That's a long one.
Yeah, and it never did, the center never did come through. The center, they claim, went about 20 miles south of us.
Yeah, you was in the bad angle.
We was in the bad part of it.
That's right, yeah.
And up to this day, that hurricane put more water over this island and then Corpus Christi Bay than any other hurricane in the history. There was, the water went as high as 18 to 20 feet in Corpus Christi Bay. But there's, on the Gulf side, the engineers checked it where the surge would go up in through those sand dunes and knock 2 rows of those sand dunes down.
Is that right?
And they claim the engineers marked it 21 feet, surge 21 feet. But then behind it, there was 14 feet.
Yeah. Well, the sand dunes broke a lot of
Yeah,
it.
oh yeah, sand dunes broke a lot of that
Sure.
stuff away from it.
Well, those were long years gone past.
Yeah. I say, in my days, I went through many hurricanes here on this island.
Yeah.
And we survived as good or better than a lot of people did over on the mainland. I want to tell you about 19, the hurricane. We was isolated. The only way we get to and from the island was by boats days. Well, there wasn't only one boat left. And it was a little old 20-foot narrow boat that belonged to old Chet Roberts.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, Chet, yeah.
Yeah.
And he had it. And he had it tied up in behind the sand hills. And we used that to carry, we had some skills that was left over. Meantime, there was a boat up in Galveston, a freight boat that used to run between Houston and Galveston and Corpus Christi, a shallow draft freight boat. But she was loaded down with freight and dry goods and stuff like that, headed for Corpus Christi. When they got word of that hurricane coming, so they stayed in Galveston. When the hurricane's over with, about, I guess 6 or 7 days after the hurricane's over with, they let her come on down here, and she anchored up on the south side of Harbor Island there. All that stuff was cleaned out. She anchored up there, and we take that little one, this lung motorboat, one of the silver little motorboat,
go out there
tie those skills onto it, and we go there and go up alongside of her, and pile of those canned goods, all kinds of canned goods, and,
Yeah.
in cases, and dry goods, shoes, and clothes, and things like that. And it's distributed around to the people that need it on the island, washed away.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, the Coast Guards had one lifeboat left, and it was in behind this over here where the school got that all that baseball, football field
yeah.
around that corner. Well, that boat drifted down there, and that, but there wasn't no motor in it. It was
Oh, an oar.
rowboat,
Yeah.
double-end rowboat.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, they used that, the men did, and load these people in that and roll that thing all the way to Randall's Pass and back, trying to unload people off of the mainland. That went on for about a week after the storm, trying to get all the people off. Meantime, the custom boat out of Galveston, used to call them revenue cutters, those cutters.
Yeah, revenue cutters.
Revenue cutters.
Yeah.
They sent her down here to pick up people. I'll never forget old Spec Brown and his whole family was on that thing, and some of the other people around it. And I don't know, they must have picked up about 75 or 80 people put on that thing. And they headed out over the bar, and there was still so much current going out there, and southeast wind blowing. The seas were so high, that old boat would go up like that and come down and just bury itself.
Go right through the next
Yeah,
one.
and they tell me the time that boat got to Galveston with all these people on it, nearly every one of them was seasick on there.
Well, imagine,
Everybody
yeah.
was seasick. Yeah, they moved them off down.
Well, was it it was an old steam vessel in those days?
Yeah, an old steamboat.
Yeah.
Fantail steamboat. Straight up and down bow, two masts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a house all
Yeah.
the way fore and
The
aft.
whole name of it Comanche.
The Comanche.
Comanche.
Who was counting on her?
I don't know, because she was stationed in Galveston.
Oh, I see, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. She was stationed in Galveston.
Well, there was no inside run between there and here. It had to be
Yeah.
outside, didn't it?
And so many of those things that happened back in those days, like also after the 1916 hurricane, that was the first one I witnessed. I was a kid then, 11 years old. And it didn't do too much damage, just right around the waterfront.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it come in through the Yucatan and come on up. Well, we didn't know anything about it till it already hit us. And
Back
hit
in
us
those
late.
days, you didn't know those things in
And
advance.
it hit us late in the evening, and then by morning it was gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they left one old sailboat right in the big middle, that old dock where the Mathews old dock used to be down there. Well,
For the
that
old
was-
Silver King?
yeah, where the old Silver King was at.
Okay, all right.
Well, that one time those days was what they call a municipal pier.
Uh-huh.
And right in the big middle of that pier there, that's that big old sailboat laying there.
Is that right?
Yeah, sitting there.
Oh, good night.
And they were still working on the jetties. They had doing some work on the jetties at Clark and Company. And they had a big old steam derrick anchored up there in the Lady Ann Channel and steam towboat and some barges. Anyway, they bought that big old steam derrick in there. They put slings around that old sailboat and they picked it up, set it back
Left
in the
it up,
water.
set her down in the water, yeah. Go on there and do those things.
That is like, you remember all these potholes down through the
Oh,
island.
yeah.
You know, what we call them tanks. Or,
When the first duck arrived, that's
yeah.
where he landed.
yeah,
That's where he stayed from
Now
then on.
that wasn't there until 19 hurricane. 19 hurricane would find spots, go over top of those sand dunes and then just kick it out.
Dig 'em out,
Big
yeah.
holes.
Mhm.
And that's what caused them. And on the, what we used to call the old swimming hole down here at the jetties.
Behind the South Jetty,
Behind
yeah.
the South Jetty.
Yeah,
Oh,
I've enjoyed that.
Before that 19 storm, we could take our old horse and buggy and walk right over top of the jetties and go out there 200 to 300 feet on dry land right in the middle of that ship channel.
Is that
channel,
right?
Yeah, driving back.
That's where
That's what happened there.
that's where Louise taught
Yeah.
me to swim in that old swimming
But
hole.
after that 19 storm, that was all the way from the universities, where the university is now, all the way down to through to the end of the Gulf, that was wide open.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I say 100 to 150 feet wide, 15 to 18 feet of water in it.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of places, when you've been in that swimming hole, you can find, playing around and then diving down deep, you can find some of those big boulders where they rolled out in that thing.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And on meantime, too, in 1916, the engineer built a dike right down the middle of St. Joe Island.
Part of it's still there, isn't it?
Little bitty narrow gauge railroad, they use that.
Mm-hmm.
And up here by the south end of Liddy Ann Island, there's Sizzler Piling still sitting there. They call it Clark's Tank.
Yeah, I know.
Well, that's where they're loading the rock from the mainland, bringing it from the mainland on barges and bringing it over there and putting it on the little narrow gauge railroad and building that
They
dike.
built that north jetty, huh?
No, they built a dike. The north jetty is already built there.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, where what's it called got his jetty boat dock
Yeah.
right now. Well, just this side of it, just a little bit, this west of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is the north jetty going out this way, and the other one makes a curve like that and turns. Joins that and goes right straight down the middle of that island.
I have seen the remains of that old dike down
Yeah.
through there.
Yeah, well, you can still see some remains of it yet.
The remains of that old dike was the roof on our living room and dining room. That's where Florida and I went up. He had found it when he was fishing. And he came home and he said, "Babe, I know where our ceiling is." We went up there, took a skiff, anchored the boat up, went inshore. And that stuff was tongue and groove, about 5 feet high, but about that much was above the land. And the 3 feet down in the sand was like new lumber.
Mm-hmm.
So we hauled all that heavy stuff down. He didn't have to use a hammer. It just was fit right in, tongue and groove. That all he did was slide it out, and I carried it. We loaded the skiff, and the tide went out. And we spent the night there.
And all that flotation and couldn't get it out.
Anyway, on the beach there was plenty of driftwood, but up there you couldn't find a stick to build a fire with.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew we had to spend the night, but he waited out and got the blanket out of the boat, and we'd been cut salt sea limbs and made a pile about that high, spread the blanket on top of it. And he said, "Babe, let's take a swim and wash this sand off before we go to bed." We jumped into that water, and it was like ice water. We pretty near bounced out of it, got back, and by that time the salt cedar had cried in our blanket. You could wring the water out. And he snitched a few fish, cooked them over a fire. We were going to have a Florida breakfast. Only no pound branches. So he cooked them on bay bushes, and they were
That
so
would
strong
flavor
the
'em.
bay we couldn't beat them.
That would flavor them.
And the tide didn't come in till we floated until late that afternoon. But that's where the lumber came from,
was your
for our
ceiling.
driftwood house.
Well, that's like back in the early 20s and the late teens. They was hauling, these boats was hauling lots of lumber out of Honduras.
Mm-hmm.
And they was loading it on these barges on deck.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they used steam towboats tow them back to the States. 90% of that was going to those yards in Beaumont.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Lumber back in Beaumont.
Honduran mahogany
Yeah.
far out. Mm-hmm.
And that stuff would sometimes wash off of those boats come across there, and they'd come down and eat. In other words, you could go down to the beach, like she said at the time, and find all kinds of big planks that wide, rough,
Yeah, the
not
rough
finished,
cut.
rough stuff.
Yeah.
And My first experience building a skiff, I built it out of that. Out of white pine.
Mm-hmm.
And all the tools you work with, you just eat the tools up, that's sand and grit and mucks and everything else. And I built that thing, and I never painted it or nothing, just left it like that. And about 30 days or so, you couldn't, that thing got so waterlogged that you couldn't hardly pick it up.
Lift it.
Yeah, just soak up in that water. I'll never forget that. Now my oldest brother, he was captain on one of those towboats that was carrying that stuff through Honduras, and then brother Tony, Sonny married his daddy. And the other guys that lived, one time lived in Rockport. They worked on a towboat together, and they'd bring that lumber through, taking it in the Beaumont.
Yeah.
And the boat he was on was a gold converted steam yacht. Made a towboat out of it.
What do you say?
Yeah. And named Keachai.
Keachai.
Keachai. And
Where that name come from?
I don't know.
Indian.
Yeah, just like,
Probably out of Honduras.
and I say that, and they call, the other words like to say that this part of the coastline, they all call it the fight those days.
Yeah. Devil's
They call it
Elbow
coastal
now.
bend now, you see. Got a
Yeah.
curve in there, and that's where they've always said that all that debris and lumber and stuff would always come down and through that
Down
stuff.
around the shells.
Yeah.
Little
Down-
big shells.
Your big shell all the way to this, down
Right.
this way. And another thing that I remember quite well, I was young with that then. There was two ships right off Galveston. They collided out there in foggy weather. And both of them were cargo carrying ships. They were running between Galveston and New York.
Yeah.
Mallory Line and Margate Line.
Yeah.
So one of these ships was loaded down with barrels of wine and brandy and whiskey and cotton and stuff like that. Well, the ship that ran that one knocked a big hole in one of those big hatches, and that stuff floated, come all the way down from just this end of San Joe Island on down the island.
Yeah.
And you never seen the like of guys scrambling.
Can well imagine.
All this, some of those barrels of that brandy would come in 50-gallon wooden barrels.
Yeah. Yeah.
And your wine, to say, most of them come in 20-gallon kegs.
Mm-hmm. All had bones
Yeah.
in them.
Everybody would rolling those things up in the sand hills, hiding it, waiting until they get a chance to haul it in. And some of the other guys would be sitting there watching them where they'd hide it.
Yeah.
During the night, they'd go by and roll that stuff somewhere other place and take it.
And hide it again. Yeah.
Uncle Dan Brumley owned a lot of this stuff over here by where Wilson cottages are, all the way back in that area.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And behind Laura Farlow's old home, Don's old home.
Yeah.
My uncle had a great big old barn there, and they lived there in it. And us kids, we'd go in to sneak in that barn. And some of the boys bigger than I was had knocked those plugs out.
Yeah, the bones.
And then take a rag, stick down there, dig it up, the old tin can, and squeeze it like that. And some of those boys get real drunk. And I took a little bit at one time, and I got drunk from it too. And I was a little old kid. And boy, my mother found out about that. Boy, I got it.
She taught you not to do it.
Anyway, that's what happened with that. Brother John Molina, he had 6 bales of cotton up at his house that he got off of that thing.
Well, how did John Molina fit into your family?
He married one of my sisters.
Oh, okay.
He married Bubba Molina's wife, mother.
Her mother. Yeah.
In other words, Festus Clark was married her after John and
Oh, I
sister.
see.
Yeah, after she, and they got a divorce. John and Sister Bessie got a divorce, and then sister married Festus Clark.
Oh, yeah.
And John Molina married Sister Bessie when during when building the jetties. That's how I come him to come down here. He followed those guys.
Yeah.
And he come from the same country my daddy did. But he migrated over to New Zealand, and he worked in the mines over there in New Zealand, and then he migrated to the States. When he got to the States, he kept moving over down the line till he found out, and he come here. And
So what else came out of those barrels, was there? You had pretty good pickings on lumber.
oh yeah.
What else came up on
Well, after 19 hurricane, the jetties were built, but they had cross ties across where the Revell piled, and then they laid on top of the cross beam.
Yeah.
They laid 12 or 12 stringers, anywhere from 25 to 30 feet long, and then they laid the cross tires on top of that in the track. That stuff was piled up all through these sand dunes. Those 12 or 12 big stringers, some of them 25, 30 feet long. My daddy had a pair of mules and old wagon. We'd go down there and we'd take those wheels and paddle those things up, and then raise that up tight, tie those timbers up there, and we'd bring them back. Bring them up in the yard, and he'd hire a man to cut those things up with a two-man saw. And that was my job. He put me on the job
On the
with
other
him,
end of the saw.
on the other with that old man. That old man, the only time he ever stopped to put saws when he would roll him up a cigarette.
Yeah.
Cut them up in chunks where it'd go in our wood cook stoves, things like that, and then sit there and split them up in blocks. And we would have wood stacked up 8 to 9 feet high, and sometimes pretty as long as this room.
What kind of lumber was it? What kind of wood?
Most pine.
Pine.
Pine, yeah.
Oh, longleaf yellow pine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, every pine. And then on top of that, my daddy would go over here to Randy's and order 2 or 3 cords, they call it, of oak, and bring it there. And use that oak for where you act like at nighttime you want to keep your
Fire going all night.
All night long and put that oak in.
That oak would burn, yeah.
It would hold up.
That
But
pine go up
would,
and
pine
smoke.
would smoke and go up. And we always kept a large supply of already cut up wood. That's all they had to do was go out there and pick an armful of it up, we bring it in, put it in the bin there.
An unending supply.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Elda talking about her getting her ceiling from over there at the old dike. You probably remember when Dad, my brother, and myself rode across to where the old cotton dock was, about a mile up the channel. A storm had knocked her down. Well, my brother Russ and Dad and myself rode across there, and we get those 2x12 planks. And most of them, you know, 10, 12 foot, 14 foot planks that had been knocked down. Well, we'd clear them over there and get them separated and make a raft out of them and tow them back across with a skiff. And then we would have them, we had some kind of an old car or something, I believe. Bring them from where we landed on the channel up to, remember where, I don't guess you remember where we used to live, where Edna's shell shop was?
Yeah.
The original house on that lot. We bought it from Henry Olson for $50. And we used those 2x12s and built a 24 by 24 foot house there. 2 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen. And the whole thing, the foundation and all the outside walls, all the stringers and everything was 2x12. Because that's all it was 2x12. And that's what was our first house here on the island that we built.
Yeah, I remember.
And I can remember seeing our dad come up. That's, of course, the storm. We were up by your house by them. But Dad would come up, and we had salvaged a lot of windows from the shack on the point, and we had windows to spare. Dad would come up and take a sash on his shoulders and carry it down the bill. I think Edgar was mixed up in that somewhere too.
I think he probably was, and I was
Yeah,
still a kid, so I was the nail man.
Well, Edgar has told me that he helped get the planks across.
Well, he probably did.
That old,
Well, you see, he was enough older by that time,
that
but
old
he was
building,
real
still-
strong.
Yeah,
that old building's still sitting there too. Joe built it.
that's right, it's still there.
Yeah, still there, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know,
Built
that's
all
what,
out of salvage beach lumber and,
and 2x12s from the old cotton dock.
yeah.
Well, you know, during the storm, I forget which storm it was, but it sustained tremendous damage. It knocked off of the foundation, and one side of the roof had been hit by something, caved in, and Edna was going to, because at that time that was her home. She was going to demolish the thing in order to give it up. And I went in there and looked at that and said, you know, that's not a big job to salvage that place. So I went and talked to Marbury. Well, Marbury's an entrepreneur anyway. I said, Marbury, we can jack that thing up and set it back on its foundation. We can repair that roof, and Edna will still have her home. Because, you know, she was shaking sheets in those days to make a living. Well, Marbury thought we could do it too, so actually we got busy. Got old car jacks and blocks and things got in there, and we jacked that thing back up level. And I don't know where the roof material came from. Maybe they had some money or something. That way we repaired the roof. And during that procedure, the thought came to me that this is right on the highway, on the road from the ferry. And there's a lot of traffic passing. Why don't Edna? Because she was making some shells, I think, for Elda at that time.
That what?
She was building some shell, putting shell craft together. I think he was taking some of it from her.
Well, I started my shellcraft in '33, but after Edna came, why, I paid her to help me.
Yeah.
And then I think the first thing that she sold, though, afterward, she had baby Panamas. She was sick a lot back then.
Yeah.
And every morning when I'd go to the post office, I'd run over. And we strung up a lot of those baby Panamas like beads. And I think Marbury had a place down on the causeway. He'd take them down there and sell them.
Yeah.
That's how Edna got started in her shell work.
Yeah, that was in our shell work, but while I was rebuilding that house, the thought struck me, why not just put a shell shop right there in the house, in the living room? So she thought that was a good idea, and that's exactly what we did. We took her living room, and we put shells around there, she started out of that. And that thing eventually turned into, you know, a big shop.
You remember, I'm pretty sure that the old prior home used to be back behind the sand dunes back here.
Yeah, way back in there. Yeah.
Boy, that house was built out of the lumber that come out of this old Mary Wreck used to be out there in a channel that
Is
stuck
that
up
right?
there. Yeah. That house built out of that.
Well, how much of that wreck stayed above, or did any of it stay above
Well,
the
it
surface?
stayed there until they when they come back to deepen that water out here
Yeah.
about, I forget how many years back it was. Well, that thing finally submerged down and broke, and I think
The house stayed above surface
Yeah, that
for
was
a while.
that was a steam engine that
Yeah.
stuck out of water.
Yeah,
That's what they call old steeple compound.
yeah.
Big old single cylinder that turned the side wheelers.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Mhm. She was a side
She
wheeler.
was a side wheeler.
Yeah.
My daddy come in to offer a ship out of New York. One of the first propeller-driven ships. And he come down to New Orleans.
Mhm.
And when they got off of New Orleans, they hit a hurricane,
Mhm.
and they couldn't control the ship and sunk off the mouth of it, off of New Orleans. Anyway, they come all ashore in New Orleans. Then my daddy caught this old Mary coming to Galveston.
Mhm.
He caught it, and he took a ride on it, in other words. And when he got to Galveston, he found so many of his old countrymen there, he just got off and left it.
Yeah, that's where
And
he stayed.
that's where he migrated down the line, down here.
Well, but darn. Have you ever thought about what it must have been like to be in a side wheeler in a hurricane? Considering the construction of those vessels in those days.
Well, as far as I can remember, the story was told about that old thing. There were no jetties worked in those days.
Not at all. Huh?
And she was trying to come in the pass. She missed the pass. And she come on the south side of the pass. In other words, the pass was further up the line from where she was at.
Yeah.
And she laid there, and they finally got the people, passengers. They finally got the passengers off of there by the Coast Guard. They called them lifesaver station those days.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
A lifeboatman was the term for the people.
And they got them off of there. And the captain and them trying to salvage the boat, but they never could. She finally went down
in the sand, yeah.
and sunk down the sand. So any of these wrecks you find on the beaches today, in a little while they'll disappear in that sand.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they'll just submerge in that that sand.
I wonder how deep they actually go before they stop
They
submerging.
go down and release decks too.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That deep?
That deep. Well, right behind us, south jetty, there's a steam tug that went down there.
Yeah.
And after many years, you go there, you see the whole outline of that steam tug. And she was taking one of these First World War ships that they picked up out there in the Gulf that was listed at about a 30-degree angle. Right here,
Yeah.
and pumped her out, and this towboat was going to take her out that night, take her to Orange. One of these shipboard tugs built during the Second World War.
Oh yeah.
Pretty good sized towboat. And there was big northeasters blowing that night. And Captain George Roberts was on one, and Cooper Walker was on the towboat, and Captain George Roberts was on the barge. And just as they going out the channel, that northeast wind, and this old board took a sheer and went up on the end of the south jetty.
I know exactly what had happened, yeah.
And that towboat, there were two pilots that got off that night, got off and left that captain on. That captain said he had to try to pull that thing off, so he left it alone. During the night, the towboat broke her hawser. She's backing down trying to get another hawser on. She backed right over the south jetty, knocked her rudder and wheel off. She drifted in behind the south jetty and sunk.
Pretty safe.
And the next morning, we all go down there, and there's where the two masts and smokestack sitting up out of water, part of the lower house sitting out of water. And the wheelhouse and all was already broken down and laying up on the beach right behind the south jetty.
The seas had broken that off, yeah.
And meantime, she had one of those big searchlights sitting on top of that house, wheelhouse, and that floated in there. I don't know who ever got a hold of that stuff, but the steering wheel was on there.
Probably about an 8-foot steering wheel.
Big tall steering wheel, yeah, big wood spoke steering wheel.
The spokes sticking out on it all the way around, and if you tried to hold it there, it would throw you over against the pilot house wall.
And then in 1921, when we had that June blow in 1921, it took that old barge off the end of the jetty. She broke up, come ashore. And a lot of it, boiler and all that stuff was still on it. It was laying out there somewhere in the Gulf. Never ever found that. But anyway, a lot of that old wreckage where those old spikes you set up along the beach, those old.
Yeah, I remember those
down
spikes.
there. You see those? Well, that was, a lot of that was her. The bottom part of those things.
Yeah.
And then there was another wreck just south of there. Right off a big hill and about 35 feet of water. It was one of those wooden ships built during the war.
Those spikes used to stick up there, and eventually they'd get covered with sand.
Get covered up
and
with sand.
here come a hurricane and uncover them again, and then you'd have part of the wood and all the old spikes.
I was working for the government engineers then, 1920, 25, late 25 or early 26, remember. Anyway, they claimed that thing was a menace to navigation down there. But it was about 8 feet of water over the top. Went down there and took took Don Farley's daddy, one of the divers. And I was running one of the boats for the government. We took this dynamite down there and placed it in sacks. And he was diving, he put it all around that thing.
Mm-hmm.
We blew it up. Well, when it blew it up, it just, some splinters thing come up, wasn't a whole lot of it. But my God, you ought to see the spadefish and
A lot of fish came up.
Yeah, we caught plenty of Spanish mackerel and kingfish off that thing.
Mm-hmm.
You could see the whole outline of the hull of the boat at times when the water was clear. You see our hatches and everything now.
Was that the old boiler that you used to set up above the
The old
surface?
boiler, that's the Argo. That come out.
Argo.
Yeah, that come out of Honduras down
Oh,
there.
that's one of those.
That's where she come from, and she missed something the other. Anyway, they beached her down there. There
Yeah.
bunch of those Honduras guys on it.
Mm-hmm.
And
I remember that old
Yeah.
boiler setting
Yeah,
up
the old
there
boiler
for
setting up there.
years and years.
And later on, we got some bad weather, different kinds of some hurricanes and